What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I did want to talk about Need for Speed Heat. Now, part of this is probably going to have to do with the recent Volume 7 update on Unbound, because I have to admit, guys, the updates on Unbound have actually been pretty dang impressive. But on the other side of that, it brings me back to Heat in a certain way. Now, that really does make me think, though, Need for Speed Heat had so much potential, like, what happened? Now, the reason why I am asking that, guys, is when looking at Unbound, like, we can all admit, the updates are actually pretty fun, and so far, like the Volume 7 one recently, has been pretty impressive. A few examples here is, for one, we actually have the brand new 2024 Mustang Dark Horse. I do know a lot of players definitely wanted that car in like a Need for Speed or like a racing game. On top of that, we also have 75 items in that entire Speed Pass, which I would say compared to like Motorfest doesn't even have a Speed Pass, or some of the updates in that game aren't all that great. So you're probably looking Unbound going, wow, like these updates are pretty dang good. What's funny about that is my brain immediately goes, wait a second. Need for Speed Heat was also pretty dang good when it came out, but the question is, what happened to it, man? Like, a few things I was thinking about with this. For one, guys, this game, no. A few things I was thinking about it, like, don't get me wrong here, we all do know the Need for Speed Unbound campaign was a bit cringy, but at least it was actually going to have a campaign. Meanwhile, Heat was basically like, what, like maybe 5 to 6 hours if you maxed everything out quick. And the main reason why I say this, though, guys, is probably going to come down to the fact that the second I beat the campaign, I was immediately like, wait a second, that's it? They had to have rushed this out, like this definitely wasn't finished, or they most likely probably like cut a lot of the campaign out of the game that they probably would have added to it, to where maybe they were like, you know what, guys, we got to get this out. This is probably going to be it. We're also working on like the next Need for Speed title, which in return was Unbound. So it probably makes you wonder if like they had a lot more stuff planned for Need for Speed Heat, but obviously things happen and they're most likely like, you know what, we're going to scrap it, even though this probably could have been one of the best modern racing games in this era. Now, I do know a lot of players can probably argue that sure, the game has its flaws, or there's going to be some things we obviously don't like. For example, having the Porsche RSR being the fastest car in history. Not only is it going to be good in this Need for Speed, but it was good in Payback, and it was also really good in 2015. It's not as good in Unbound because they finally were like, yo, Porsche, not today, brother. We're going to have a Golf GTI destroy everything, at least, that was changed afterwards. But it really does make me think, though, like when playing through the campaign, playing through Heat, I was like, this game did have like the black market updates and stuff like that, but we also have like the paid McLaren F1 just to do the black market thing for it. And then besides that, there really wasn't much of any updates on it. And then when jumping back onto Unbound, guys, we're on Volume 7, and there's also going to be a pretty high chance of more updates coming next year for that game. So it's really like, you know what, maybe this is the Need for Speed they're building upon, while they most likely might have ended up scrapping Need for Speed Heat, even though the game had a massive amount of potential. Do you guys also agree that this game probably could have been an insanely amazing racing game? Like, for example, guys, they could have added all kinds of things like a map expansion. Do not worry, I'm going to touch on that in an upcoming video as well, so stay tuned for that one. They also could have added like an extended, like maybe storyline DLC would have been dope, where they probably could have built upon like the thing with like Lieutenant Torres, or, doing like an entire like drug thing like I mentioned in my other video, which they probably could have built upon that, made the story a lot longer than what it was. Not even going to lie, guys, when I beat that story, I beat all the main side things. I was like, that's it? The first thing I legit did, as I mentioned in my old video, is I was like, you know what, let me go online, see what other people think about it. And legit, going on Reddit, going on different forums, everybody was like, the campaign was too short. Why was it this short? I actually did not think I was going to beat it that quick. The other side of that is some players were like, you know what, my motivation was gone. Why would I go level up cars? Why would I go level up certain things? Because, like, the entire game is done now. I could go online and, like, race with my friends, which is going to be really fun. Don't get me wrong, I'm actually having a great time doing that, like doing online events. The only issue I'm having with that, at least on Need for Speed Heat, though, is depending on what time you're actually on during the day or even in the evening and nighttime, there is sometimes not going to be that many people doing events, so you're obviously not going to be in a lot of races with people. Whereas if you were to jump on something like Need for Speed Unbound, the multiplayer is probably going to be way more populated, only because that's going to be the new Need for Speed and they're actually updating it. So it's most likely going to attract a lot more players to that game because it's, being updated. But it's really weird though, because when I'm playing Heat, I can actually see certain things going, you know what, that would have been insane. Imagine if they added this. And they could have probably did so many things to build upon Need for Speed Heat, but that obviously did not end up happening. The game was obviously axed fairly early, which we can also say the same thing happened to Need for Speed Payback, to where they only added like one update to it, which, by the way, was going to be like, I think it was the Speed Cross update or something. And to be honest, guys, it wasn't all that, bro. It really wasn't. And then jumping on Need for Speed Heat, which obviously came out after Payback, this one was most likely axed, and then they're probably having Unbound out now, and they're like, you know what? The next Need for Speed game ain't going to come out for a while, so let's go add some dope content into this one. And our current competition is Forza and the Crew Motorfest, which are completely different games in their own aspects. Whereas something like Need for Speed is going to be a really fun arcade racer. You have police and stuff like that. It gives you like a different atmosphere. And what's funny about that, guys, don't get me wrong, I love Motorfest. I also have never played Forza. But my goodness, I have such an amazing soft spot for Need for Speed. Like, I love these games. Jumping on a Heat, I'm having an absolute blast on it. You know what's also hilarious? I have been playing Need for Speed Unbound a lot more recently, and I'm having so much fun on it. Probably because it's going to have like a different type of atmosphere, as I mentioned. Different vehicle handling, there's engine swaps and stuff in Need for Speed, and just crazy different cars you can use. And it's going to have just like a different feeling to it, which I do think sets it apart. Whereas if a lot of players, for example, were playing Need for Speed Heat and they did add like a huge update to it, I feel like this game probably could have lasted years, guys. What do you think? Like, would you actually like to see years of content on Need for Speed Heat instead of Unbound? And then maybe Unbound could have been under that work for all that time, having all kinds of extra content in it. Now, this is probably going to sound a bit insane because we do know right now for a fact it obviously isn't going to happen. But let's think about this in a different dimension or like a different timeline for a second. Imagine, guys, right now in Need for Speed Heat, when the game came out, it actually had updates for around 2 to 3 years on it. Maybe even 4 years, which is probably going to be a bit far-fetched. But let's say it had like 2 years of updates on it to where it had like battle passes or like a motor pass or, you know, a speed pass for that matter, and like something like Unbound. Then they end up adding like some new vehicles, maybe 3 or 4 vehicles into like the pass, and they have like a special thing to where you can unlock like another vehicle, similar to something like a black market type of thing that's part of like the speed pass or something. Then we also see like an extended like DLC for like the story that's also going to be in each speed pass, to where maybe it does end up adding like a chapter or two for like the story on each speed pass to where you can follow it. But it also gives like a context behind the speed pass and stuff like that, which would be dope. And on top of all that, guys, we get some new events and also some maybe new game modes, which would be kind of dope, similar to like Unbound getting like the drifter like drag stuff in there, which I would say a lot of players would most likely not mind having more game modes or events being added, because I feel like in a racing game you can never have enough racing events. Or if they might have wanted to add some drift events or drag events, I don't think anyone's going to mind, bro, because again, you can't have more than enough race events in a racing game so you can race. Not sure I'm going with this. But I really do feel like something like that would be pretty insane. As I did mention, though, even a map expansion could have easily been possible. I am once again going to touch on that in a different video because that's an entirely different topic. Especially when looking at the map in Heat, it really does make you scratch your head. But I really do feel like, guys, something like that could have easily been added into Heat. Like, this game had so much potential, man. The biggest thing I keep asking myself is what happened to it. And I do guess in some ways the game was obviously canceled or axed like through it, to where we had a few updates like the black market stuff, and they're probably like, you know what, let's just not do this, let's focus on the next Need for Speed game. Do you guys actually think it would have been better if they would have kept building upon Need for Speed Heat, and then most likely release Need for Speed Unbound maybe a year or two later, having more content in that game and also maybe the game being built up a bit better? There's also something else I did want to touch on, guys, that kind of annoyed me about this. For example, in Need for Speed Heat, you obviously have daytime and nighttime racing. You can make a lot of money during the daytime and also like chase police at nighttime, and you can pretty much earn rep, earn some parts, and make a little bit of money. One thing I would have actually liked to see in Need for Speed Heat is you can make money at nighttime. For example, instead of getting like reputation from the events, maybe switch it so you can make money. That would have been dope. Also, they probably should have kept the Need for Speed Heat design in Unbound, at least for the single player, because making money in Unbound takes a lot longer than it does in Need for Speed Heat, my goodness. For example, guys, the Bugatti on that game is, guess this, $3.6 million if you didn't know. Meanwhile, during a day on there, like at nighttime, the most you can make is maybe around 250K. If you do every single event, last time I checked, a lot of players grinding out in a game did not want to do an event that pays $3,000 while a car is $3 million. That would take forever. 16,000 hours later into that game, I got my Bugatti. Yeah, well, what did it cost you? everything, bro. Everything. But nonetheless, though, guys, I really do think about this pretty often, man. Like, Heat legit had so much it could have had in it. The amount of updates and things they could have did to this map, or all the cars they probably could have added, I don't think players wouldn't have minded it. And then they easily could have released Unbound again, like a few years later, being a lot more built up, maybe changing around that entire, like, multiplayer to single player design just a tad, to where it's going to be connected. You buy your cars in single player, making money and stuff's going to be a tad easier in there. That way, it's probably going to bring a lot more players in. Of course, the game is also going to be in development longer, getting it to a better or a finished state, instead of most likely releasing that game a bit too early, then boom, you're trying to add updates to fix it, and then, well, it's probably going to be kind of doomed. Something like the Crew Motorfest right now, to where we're over 8 months into it, and everybody's still like, where are the proper updates, y'all? What are you doing? While Need for Speed Unbound is legit getting better updates than the Crew Motorfest. That something could have easily happened as something, for example, like Need for Speed Heat. Having all the updates happen in this game probably would have most likely made it a way bigger game than it was. Funnily enough, guys, Need for Speed Heat was a big game when it came out, and I feel like it probably could have been even bigger if they most likely supported it better and probably added a lot more stuff to it. At least that's in my opinion. I would like to know what you guys think about this. Do you also think Need for Speed Heat had a lot of potential? Would you have rather seen this game get a lot more updates than Unbound? Or do you also think it probably could have been handled better? One thing I also have to admit, Unbound's pretty dang good now.